Good day everyone. I'm Alex, moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, How to Conduct a HIPAA Risk Assessment and the Surprising Danger of Not Doing One. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, Mark R. Bringelman. Mark holds bachelor's and master degree in philosophy from Emory University and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Kentucky. Retiring as an Assistant Attorney General, he now represents healthcare professionals, two government healthcare licensure boards, our government health ethics commission, parents and kids in confidential child abuse and neglect cases, termination of parental rights, and adoption of proceedings. Mark is a frequent continuing education presenter, including national organizations around the country. He helps his client navigate the law and ethics and make the rules understandable as applied to them. Mark has worked for all three branches of government. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, conference panel. This is Mark Bringelman. It's June 15th today when we are providing this live for the first time, and I appreciate the excellent introduction. So the HIPAA risk assessment will cover risk assessment under HIPAA laws, vulnerability, threat, and risk assessment analysis, scope of the risk assessment, identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, and assessing security measures in place. We will include determining threat occurrence, likelihood, and impact, finalize documentation of the risk assessment, and talk about regular review and updates to risk assessment for new employees, new laws, and new technology. And we'll focus a little bit on the end, actually quite a bit, on the surprising danger of not doing a HIPAA risk assessment, the goals of the content of the program and what this does and does not cover. So HIPAA risk assessments will help in identifying and implementing the most effective and appropriate administrative, physical, and technical safeguards to secure electronic protected health information. We can refer to a group that's called the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which helps organizations better understand the requirements of the HIPAA security rule. We've said for about the third time, risk analysis is a requirement in the Code of Federal Regulations. I didn't make this stuff up just to come up with a webinar. The scope of the analysis. Let's start with scope. Data collection. You have to assess current security measures, determine the potential impact of the threat occurring, assign risk levels. Again, 1 through 4 maybe. That sounds okay. Finalizing the documentation. The security rule requires the risk analysis be documented. Periodic review and updates to the risk analysis. So again, what could be considered wrong or inadequate as long as the frequency was reasonable for you and justified. When you're in the process, figure out what to do to minimize risk and liability. Identify and document potential threats and vulnerabilities that are reasonably anticipated. You may identify different threats that are unique to the organization. So conclusion on risk analysis. Risk analysis is the first step in the organization's security rule and compliance. Here is a deep dive. How are we doing on time now? Let's see. Oh boy, pick up the pace here. Let's get to the home stretch. This was all first reported in the publication Law 360. I want to give credit where credit is due. The entire webinar on this because it's even more of a deep dive. So how does the security rule apply to the use of cell phones? How could the result? This was from the director of OCR said in a statement. Sounds like a catchphrase. And that's my recommendation on employer-issued electronic. Here was the problem security-wise. The iPhone was unencrypted. So both of those are HIPAA violations on their own. They had to revise and maintain written policies and procedures, including password management. How did we get to $650,000? I don't work in this area. I don't defend or prosecute those. The agreement does not itemize the amount. There was no admission of liability. Makes me wonder, how can I get a $650,000 fine and no one did anything wrong? But there were no reports of unauthorized access to the protected health information on the stolen phone. The OCR itself issued a press release for the world to see. Is this the future of HIPAA enforcement? $250,000. For individual healthcare practitioners, summary and tips for avoiding liability and risk. If you are a healthcare facility, know your HIPAA confidentiality or someone who does because your facility is liable. Have regular training on HIPAA rules for everyone. Thank you all. I'm going to wrap up now with concluding comments. And this was a really good and useful, worthwhile use of our time.
Thank you, Mark. that does conclude the session for today, and thank you everyone for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day.